The night the plantation burned, Mara learned that saving a man's life could damn her own. She dragged her master from the collapsing house, flames clawing at their heels, the air thick with screams and splintering beams. But when she looked into his half-dead eyes, it wasn't Edwin Thorne staring back. It was someone older, someone buried, someone who had been waiting for her. And Mara realized that the fire outside was nothing compared to the darkness she had just awakened. The night marrowwood burned, the flames rose higher than the treetops and stained the sky the color of fresh wounds. Eveline felt the heat against her back as she ran. Not just heat, but the strange, unnatural warmth that came from something more than fire, something birthed from old sins and older hungers. The other enslaved people fled with her, their breaths sharp in the cold air. But Eveline moved differently. She was slower, heavy, as if something pulled her from behind, gripping her bones like reins. The entity. Even now, as the house collapsed into itself like a dying beast, she felt it inside her blood. A whisper, a tremor, a half-dreamed pressure beneath her ribs. Not finished, never finished. She kept running. Her lungs burned, her knees shook. But she did not turn back, not even when the wind carried the last scream of Aldrich Marrow across the field, not even when hot embers drifted like fireflies, landing in her hair and on her shoulders, not even when the ground trembled from some final collapse within the house. She reached the tree line and stopped beneath a towering cypress. The others gathered around her, women clutching their children, men panting, some bleeding from cuts they had gotten while fleeing. Eveline stood apart from them, hand pressed to her sternum. She felt something there, tight, coiled, like a muscle flexing in the dark. She closed her eyes. "Not now," she pleaded silently. "Let me breathe. Let me stay whole long enough to get them to safety." The entity answered with a low pulse that rippled through her veins like smoke. But it stayed quiet. For now, the group moved deep into the marshland, guided by moonlight and a path only Eveline seemed to sense. The air smelled of wet moss and decay. Frogs croaked in the distance. A thin fog snaked through the undergrowth, brushing against their ankles like cold fingers. Hours passed. The firelight faded behind them. The trees grew denser, older, bending over the path as though eavesdropping on their fear. Finally, they reached a clearing near a slough, where the ground rose high enough to stay dry. The elders nodded. Yes, this would do for now. The exhausted group settled, curling into the warmest patches of earth they could find. But Eveline did not sit. She walked alone to the edge of the water and stared at her reflection in the moonlit surface. The woman who stared back looked like Eveline, but thinner, her cheekbones sharper, her eyes too dark, too deep. Her skin had taken on a delicate translucence, the faintest hint of veins beneath. And her shadow on the water did not move when she moved. It stayed still. She closed her eyes, heart aching. "Are you still in me?" she whispered. A ripple passed across the water. Her reflection smiled when she did not. Eveline jerked back, breath trembling. Slowly, the water stilled. Her reflection returned to normal. But the message remained. The entity had not died with Marrowwood. It had simply found a new host, her. By morning, the group was restless, hungry, cold, fearful of patrols or hounds sent to retrieve them. Eveline did what she could, bandaged wounds, soothed children, whispered encouragement. Her presence steadied them, though none understood why. They felt a strange comfort near her, as if she carried warmth in her bones despite her thinness. But they also kept a respectful distance. Something in her aura had changed, something that hummed beneath the skin. Near midday, a boy named Jonah tugged her sleeve. "Miss Eveline." She looked down at him. "Yes? You gon' stay with us, right?" His voice carried fear he couldn't hide. Children always sensed the truth first. Eveline knelt. "I will take you as far as I can." He frowned. "Where you going?" Her breath caught. She didn't know. Not yet. But she felt a pull, a direction, a whisper of something unfinished behind her. "I don't know, Jonah," she admitted softly. "But I feel there is something I must face." The boy stared into her eyes, then stepped back, unsettled. Eveline rose slowly. Something was coming for them. Not just slave catchers or marrow kin seeking vengeance. Something older. She felt it in the earth, in the air, in the faint tremors of her ribs. The curse had not ended. It had only lost its host. Now, unbound, it would seek the nearest bloodline, and someone had survived. That night, Eveline dreamt of the Marrow brothers' dining hall. The table was long and covered with fine silverware. 2 places were set, one for Malcolm, one for Eustace, but only one chair was filled. Eustace Marrow sat there, charred, skeletal, but breathing. His remaining eye rolled toward her, glistening with hatred. "You didn't finish me," he rasped. "You freed something you do not understand." Then he smiled, a cracked, bloody smile. "And it is coming for both of us." Eveline jolted awake, her heart hammered, not with fear, but with certainty. Eustace Marrow had lived, and the curse would rebuild itself around him like flesh regrowing on bone. He would rise again, and when he did, he would come for her, not to kill her, but to reclaim what she carried in her veins. Her purpose, once merely to survive, shifted that night into something larger, darker. She must find Eustace Marrow before the curse fully resurrected, before the entity inside her completed what it had begun, before the world suffered under the next generation of Marrow blood. The Bone Nurse had been born in fire. Now she would walk into the ashes of the old world and hunt the curse that refused to die. The morning after Eveline's dream, the marshland woke in a hush. Even the birds refused to sing, as though the world sensed that something unnatural had slipped its tether during the night. Mist moved in twisting threads across the water's surface, weaving itself through the drooping branches like a funeral shroud. Eveline stood at the edge of the slough with her arms wrapped tight around herself. Her breath came in slow clouds, colder than the air should have allowed. Behind her, the others slept or whispered quietly among themselves. Most were afraid to speak loudly near her now, not out of cruelty, but instinct. Eveline felt it too. The entity inside her had grown restless. It pulsed beneath her ribs like a second heartbeat, sometimes slow as drifting smoke, other times erratic, like claws tapping bone. It did not speak in words. It spoke in hunger, direction, tension. It leaned her towards something in the distance, like a compass pointing not north, but toward a specific soul. A bloodline fragment, Eustace Marrow. The name alone felt like a splinter under her tongue. She closed her eyes, and images from the nightmare returned. His charred face, his single rolling eye, the smile cracked by firelight. The curse wanted him, needed him, and because Eveline had become the vessel that tethered the entity to this world, she felt its desire as her own. Not to kill him, to finish what had been started. Something shifted behind her. Eveline opened her eyes and saw Moses approaching. a broad-shouldered older man with quiet strength and a calmness that had steadied many during years of suffering. He approached slowly, as though nearing a wild animal. "You aight?" he asked in a low rumble. Eveline nodded, though the gesture felt like a lie. "You look pale," he said, searching for gentler words. "I feel stretched," Eveline murmured, "like I'm trying to hold more than a body ought to." Moses frowned. "Something following us?" She hesitated. Then, "No, not following, calling." Moses stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't have to carry it alone, Eveline." She looked up at him, and for a fleeting moment she saw the reflection of something black swirling behind her pupils. Moses saw it too. He froze, hands clenching at his sides. Eveline turned away. "That's exactly why I do," she whispered. Morrowfield miles away, beyond the ruins of Marrowwood, a horse stumbled through a narrow road, thick with fallen leaves. Its rider was slumped forward, barely clinging to the saddle, his breath rattling like broken glass. Eustace Marrow. His skin blistered from heat that had nothing to do with fire. His hair had burned away in patches, leaving raw, sickly flesh beneath. His left eye bulged from its socket, swollen and wet. The right eye, once as cold as riverstone, had melted into a white film, yet he still breathed, barely. He muttered as he rode. "She freed it. The damn nurse freed it." His fingers twitched around the reins. "She thinks it loves her, thinks she can tame it, but it belongs to us. The blood, the horse crooned in discomfort, but Eustace dug his heels into its sides until it obeyed. Pain radiated from his burned limbs, but pain mattered little now. There was something else inside him, something that writhed along his spine like a serpent's tail. He felt it every time he inhaled, every time he blinked, every time he thought of Eveline. She had stolen the curse's attention, but the curse always returned to blood, and the Marrow bloodline ran thick in him still. Ahead, through the trees, he saw lights. Lanterns hanging outside, a cluster of shacks and tents at the edge of a nearby logging village. He steered the horse toward it. Somewhere among those working men, those drifters, those night gamblers and whiskey drinkers, someone would help him survive long enough to reclaim what was his. The curse would need a body, and he intended to offer his. The whispering fog. That afternoon, Eveline felt the first true pull, sharp and insistent. It felt like something hooking under her ribs and tugging her eastward. She staggered, gripping the tree trunk for balance. Jonah saw her and ran toward her. "You've fallen over, Miss Eveline." She forced a small smile. "Just dizzy, baby." But the truth was far worse. The entity was growing impatient. Its hunger had always been tied to pain, suffering, imbalance in the blood. With Aldrich dead and the brothers gone, it was untethered. Yet Eveline's acceptance of the half-ritual had anchored it partially inside her. Not enough to satisfy it, more than enough to corrupt her. Her bones throbbed. The whites of her eyes darkened faintly. Beneath her fingernails, veins swelled in unnatural branching patterns. She needed to get the others to safety, fast. "We need to move again tonight," Eveline told Moses. "There's danger near." He studied her, his jaw working. "You ain't sleeping. You look worn to bone." "It ain't sleep I need," Eveline whispered. "It's distance." "From what?" She swallowed hard. "From myself." A survivor's return. 2 hunters from the logging camp dragged Eustace into their clinic shack, half dead. They assumed he had been caught in a bonfire based on his burns. They laid him on a cot, applied salve, bandaged him, and tried to give him water. He spat it out. "Just leave me be." The older hunter shook his head. "Nonsense. You'll live." Eustace grit his teeth as the man reached for another bandage. "You don't understand," he rasped. "I must live." His one wild eye flicked toward the window, where the forest shimmered in afternoon heat. He felt something moving there, something calling, something drawn by the remnants of the curse that clung to him like ash. "It's coming back," he whispered, voice cracking. "And I'll be the one to carry it." The younger hunter exchanged a confused glance with the older man. "You delirious, sir. Ain't nothing coming." Eustace's lips curled. They said that at Marrowwood, too. Nightfall, tremors. By dusk, Eveline and the refugees reached the old trade trail used by escaped slaves heading north. Moss hung low. Crickets thrummed. Owls called from the branches. And then Eveline froze. Her breath turned cold. The air shimmered with a sound like teeth clicking against wood. She felt the entity expand inside her, as though inhaling through her lungs. Moses stepped closer. "What's wrong?" Eveline's voice came out thin. "He's alive." Moses blinked. "Who?" "Eustace Marrow." The very name made the night grow colder. Children clung to their mothers. Jonah grabbed Eveline's skirt. Moses swallowed. "And the thing that killed his brother?" Eveline shook her head slowly. "It didn't kill him," she whispered. "It saved him." The woods darkened around them, shadows pooling unnaturally. The entity inside her surged once, sharp, pleased. Eveline gasped, falling to one knee. Moses lunged forward. "Eveline!" Her hands dug into the dirt. Her veins glowed faintly under her skin, black like ink pulsing through parchment. Jonah screamed. Her eyes. Moses froze as Eveline lifted her head. Her eyes were bottomless black pits. Not human. Not entirely. A voice slid from her throat, layered and dissonant. Not hers. Not fully. Blood wakes blood. Moses stumbled back, terrified. The entity pushed against her chest, almost bursting through. But Eveline, through pure will, forced it down, gasping as color returned to her eyes. She fell forward, shaking. Moses approached slowly. "What we gonna do?" he whispered. Eveline rose unsteadily. "We're not running anymore," she said, voice firm despite the tremble. "We find him. We face him. The curse ends when the bloodline ends." A hush fell over the group. "And if the curse becomes too strong inside you," Moses asked gently, "what then?" Eveline looked at him with a mixture of strength and dread. "Then I end with it." Meanwhile, the reawakening. In the logging camp clinic, Eustace lay shivering as sleep overtook him like a black tide. And then he dreamt he stood in the ashes of Marrowwood. The flames were gone. Only embers glowed. The ground split. Fingers, too long, too thin, rose from the earth. Then a head. A twisted, bone-pale mask of a face with hollow sockets where eyes should be. Eustace stepped forward, unable to move away. The creature stretched, bones cracking, smoke pouring from its joints like steam. It towered over him, shifting shape in slow, nauseating ripples. When it spoke, it sounded like Eveline's dying breath and the crack of a whip combined. "You live." Eustace nodded weakly. Yes, I live." "The nurse carries the rest of me." Eustace licked cracked lips. "I'll take her. Bring her back. Bind her." The entity leaned close. "Find her." Its jaw unhinged. Smoke poured into Eustace's mouth. Eyes, ears, filling him, burning him, claiming him from the inside. He woke screaming. The hunters ran in, but halted. Eustace stood on trembling legs, bandages smoking, flesh knitting itself back together like melting wax rehardening. His good eye gleamed with something inhuman. He smiled. "Fetch me a horse," he said softly. "I have a nurse to collect." The rain had ended, but the night still smelled of iron. Somewhere, miles beyond the ruins of Marrowwood, a man dragged himself through the mud with one good arm and one ruined, dangling limb. His breath came in ragged draws. Each lungful tasted like wet ash. His vision stuttered between sharp clarity and a haze of encroaching blackness. He did not know how long he had crawled. He only knew that he was alive. That was miracle enough, or curse enough, for Charles Marrow. Charles had no memory of the plantation collapsing. He remembered the nurse, Eveline, the slip of a girl he'd never once seen as more than a tool, standing over him with a look he could not place at the time, a look that wasn't hatred, wasn't fear, but something far more unsettling. Resolve. He remembered blood on her cheek, her hand trembling, the sound of tearing wood, his brother's voice, strangled with pain, the smell of burning flesh that he would later learn was his own. After that, nothing. Darkness. Then crawling. He had awakened on the forest floor, dragged by something or someone he never saw. His clothes had been ripped open. His chest was wrapped in old linen, not clean, not fresh, but wrapped. He didn't know who had done it, no tracks, no footprints, no sign of anyone. Only him. Only the lingering weight of something unseen. He lifted a hand to his chest and felt the strange, tight pattern of the bandages, thick, almost ceremonial, interlaced with knots too complex for any ordinary field dressing. A cold shiver crept up his spine. Someone had saved his life, someone who wanted him alive, but why? He continued crawling until the trees thinned and the forest opened. Moonlight spilled across a stretch of marshland. Frogs croaked. The earth pulsed with the soft, sucking breath of wet bog. Charles collapsed into the mud. Perhaps he would die here. Perhaps he should. But the moon glinted off something metallic, half buried in the dirt. A small iron pendant, familiar, carved with the old Marrow crest. His family crest. His father's crest. Charles' breath hitched. No, not this. Not him. He reached toward it, fingers trembling. But the moment his skin brushed the iron, a spark of pain jolted up his arm like a lightning bolt. Charles recoiled. The pendant vibrated, only slightly but undeniably, like something breathing beneath the metal. He backed away shaking. The curse was not dead. He survived because it wanted him. And it wanted Eveline too. 3 days later, swollen with fever and barely conscious, Charles knocked on the door of a small rural homestead on the edge of Briar's Hollow. The doctor who lived there, Dr. Amos Keel, was a man of gentle omens and quiet suspicions. A tall, reedy figure with a narrow face and a gaze that missed nothing. He took one look at Charles' wounds and frowned. "These bandages," Keel murmured, unwinding the linen with delicate fingers, "are not the work of any nurse I've ever known." Charles lay on the cot, jaw clenched. "Then who?" "That's what concerns me," Keel whispered. The doctor leaned closer. Beneath the bandages, he had expected torn flesh, infection, rot. Instead, he found something he could not understand. The wound on Charles's chest, a gash that should have exposed bone, had been sealed with dark stitching. Not thread, not sinew. Something else. Something like fine blackened roots. Keeler recoiled. "Dear God," Charles rasped. "What do you see?" "Not healing," Keel whispered, voice trembling. "Binding." He did not elaborate. Charles spent the night feverish, drifting between nightmares. In each dream, he saw Evelyn walking down a long corridor lined with bones. She never turned, never looked back. But her shadow moved wrong, flickering as if something else wore her skin. When morning came, Keel stood over him. "You must tell me the truth," the doctor said quietly. "What happened at that plantation?" Charles swallowed. "Fire. A collapse. Not that," Keel snapped. "What truly happened?" A silence stretched. Charles Marrow had never been a man who shared weakness. He was raised to command, not confess. But now he was the one bleeding, and the doctor's grey eyes held no fear of him. So Charles told him some of it, about the strange presence that lingered over Marrowwood, about the feeling that the house was alive, about Evelyn whispering to shadows, about his father's obsession with old rites from ancestral Europe, about the strange ancestral infection that seeped into the bloodline. When he finished, Keely sat back, expression unreadable. "You say Evelyn saved you?" "Yes. But the stitching on your chest, that was no human hand." Keel folded his hands. "And if this curse ties itself through flesh and lineage, why save you of all men?" Charles glared. "Why wouldn't she?" "Because she had every reason to let you die." The words hit him like a slap. He had expected judgment, hatred even. But Keel's tone was analytical, not moral. "As a physician," the doctor said softly, "I must ask what your survival serves." Charles's breathing slowed. Keel continued, "Curses don't act out of mercy. They act out of purpose. Whether Evelyn helped you or something used her hands as a vessel, you are alive because you are needed." Charles's jaw clenched. Needed for what? Keel stared at him for a long time. "To continue something," the doctor murmured, "or to finish it." For days, Charles regained strength, though the wound on his chest never stopped aching. Not a normal pain, but a pulsing, rhythmic throb. Keel watched over him with equal parts curiosity and dread. One evening, while Charles attempted to stand on his own, a young farmhand burst through the doctor's door. Sir, you won't believe it. There's talk in the hollow about a woman." Keel frowned. "Plenty of women in this town." "No, this one's different." The boy swallowed, voice shaking. "A strange woman. A runaway nurse, they say. Keeps to the woods. People claim she walks with shadows following her like dogs." Charles froze. The boy continued. "Some say she carries a book covered in bone. Others say she heals the dying with a touch. Leaves marks on them. Marks that glow in the dark." Charles gripped the table until his knuckles whitened. Keel noticed. "Does this interest you?" "It concerns me." "Her name?" Keel asked the boy. "I only heard it once," the boy whispered, "from an old woman who swore she saw her at the edge of the marsh." Charles' heart hammered. "What name?" he demanded. The boy took a shaky breath. "She called herself Evelyn Marrow." The room fell silent. Charles felt something deep inside him twist. A knot pulled tight from the moment he woke in the forest. Keel raised an eyebrow. "So the curse has taken her name as well?" Charles shook his head. "No. Evelyn would never call herself—" He stopped. Because he didn't know. He didn't know who Evelyn was anymore. That night, Charles made a decision. He would find her. But not for revenge, not exactly, not yet. He needed answers about what happened in those final moments, about why he was alive, about the binding wound stitched shut by something not human, about why Evelyn, if it was Evelyn, claimed his name. Keely tried to stop him. "You're weak." You're marked. I'm a Maro. That is precisely the problem. Charles ignored him. He packed food, water, and a lantern. He wrapped his chest tightly so the wound wouldn't tear. He took Keel's old pistol, though he doubted bullets would help against whatever Eveline had become. Before he left, Keely gave him a final warning. Charles, if she survived the collapse, she may not be the woman you remember. Charles tightened his jaw. None of us are who we were before that night. True. Keel's gaze softened. But she may not want to be found. Charles stepped into the moonlit road. She saved my life, he said quietly. She owes me answers, but something in him whispered the opposite. You owe her. And deeper still, beneath bone and heartbeat, she did not save you. She preserved you. The marshland swallowed sound. Charles trudged through knee-high water, lantern swaying, breath heavy. He followed murmurs of local sightings and half-whispered stories. He followed rumors of a woman with a torn dress and haunted eyes, who walked as if guided by something unseen. As night deepened, fog thickened and tangled around the trees like webbing. The marsh grew colder, quieter. Then Charles heard it, a soft, rhythmic humming. No, singing. Barely audible, drifting through the reeds. A lullaby he half recognized from childhood, though he could not recall why. He pushed forward, breath hitching. The singing grew clearer. And then, through the veil of fog, he saw her. A figure kneeling beside the water, long hair hanging over her face, hands cupped as if holding something precious. Eveline, alive, her dress torn, her posture weary. But her presence, her aura, felt larger than her body, like the air bent around her. Charles stepped closer. Eveline? Her head snapped upward. Her eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light. Not with color, but with depth, as if reflecting something immeasurably dark behind them. For a long moment, she simply stared. Then her lips curved into the faintest echo of a smile. Charles, she whispered, I was wondering when you would wake. His heart stopped. You knew I survived? Eveline rose slowly, hands still wet from the marsh. In her right palm lay something small and pale. A tooth. Human. I stitched you shut, she said softly. You would not have lasted long. He swallowed hard. Why? Why save me? Her expression darkened with something he could not decode. Pain? Pity? No one else could carry the rest of the burden. Charles's blood ran cold. Burden? Eveline stepped closer. You're part of it now. What is it? Her voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere. The Maro cannot die. She lifted her palm. The human tooth pulsed with a faint heartbeat. And neither, she said, can you. The tooth in Eveline's palm pulsed again, once, twice, like a small, sick heart refusing to die. Charles couldn't speak at first. His breath went shallow. His legs nearly buckled from equal parts fear and disbelief. Eveline, he murmured, what have you done? Eveline tilted her head, not cruelly, not kindly, but with a strange detached softness, as though she were listening to a faint echo no one else could hear. You don't understand, she whispered. None of us chose this. Not you. Not me. Not even the first of the Maros. She gently lowered the tooth back into the folds of her dress. Charles forced his voice. Steady. Tell me what I am part of. Eveline studied him for several seconds. Then she turned and began walking deeper into the marsh. If you want answers, she said, follow. He hesitated, only a moment, then trudged after her. The marsh swallowed their footsteps. The night air grew colder as Eveline guided him through a tangle of reeds that rose taller than either of them. Her steps were strangely graceful, quiet, almost rehearsed. She didn't look back to see if Charles followed. She simply expected he would. The deeper they went, the more Charles noticed something wrong with the ground. At first, he thought the pale lumps scattered beneath the water were stones. They were not stones. Skulls. Tiny ones. Animal. Human. Some half-buried, some clean as if boiled, some cracked open like eggs. Eveline, his voice trembled despite his efforts. Why bring me here? She didn't stop walking. This is where the curse sleeps, she said calmly, and wakes. Charles felt sweat bead along his neck. The curse? You keep speaking of it as if it's alive. Eveline paused and turned her head slightly. It is. The fog thinned for a moment, just enough for Charles to see something ahead. A low mound of earth, half swallowed by roots and vines. It looked like a burial hill, old, ancient. At the mound's base, a small opening yawned like a mouth. A cave. Eveline approached it without fear. You first, she said softly. Charles balked. Why me? Because it's yours. The words hit him like a blow. He stepped back. What do you mean, mine? Eveline inhaled, then exhaled slowly, as though bracing herself. Charles, this land was not home to the Marrows. Your ancestors did not build their fortune here. They stole it. They forced themselves onto a soil that already had an owner, a spirit, a presence. Charles stared. Eveline continued. Your bloodline is not cursed because of what you did. It is cursed because of what your family took. She gestured toward the cave. And what still lies beneath? Charles swallowed. His throat felt painfully tight. You expect me to believe my family made a pact with some spirit? Eveline's expression softened. Not a pact, a mistake. She stepped closer, placing a hand near her heart. When the first Marrow ancestor came here, he found the land abundant beyond measure. Crops thrived, livestock doubled, rivers stayed full even in drought. He believed he'd discovered paradise. Her voice grew quieter. He did not realize the land fed him because it was feeding on him. Charles shuddered. You're talking in riddles. No. Eveline shook her head. I'm telling you that the land attached itself to your bloodline because your ancestor was the first to survive it. Charles blinked. Survive? What? Eveline's eyes flicked to the cave. The thing that lives in the bones of the earth. It follows the Marrows. It nourishes them when they are strong, devours them when they are weak. Charles' blood went cold. He remembered his father's strange rituals, the bloodletting, the offerings, the nights he'd whispered in a language Charles never learned, the fear in his mother's eyes whenever storms rattled the shutters. A memory surfaced, his father gripping his shoulder when he was only 10. The land keeps what belongs to it. Charles had thought it an odd phrase then. Now he felt it like a blade at his throat. What does this have to do with my wound? Charles demanded. With you saving me? Eveline reached toward his chest. May I? He hesitated, but nodded. She lifted the edge of his shirt and examined the black root stitching. Her gaze softened with a mix of pity and sorrow. I didn't do this alone, she whispered. His stomach tightened. What do you mean? The land stitched you, she murmured. The curse held you together because you are the last Marrow. Charles staggered back. Last? Eveline nodded slowly. Your brothers are dead. Your father's line ends with you. Silence crushed him, and then she whispered the part that almost brought him to his knees. and the land will not let you die until another takes your place. Charles stared at Eveline with a mixture of horror and something he could not name. You're telling me I'm protected? That I cannot die? Not protected, Eveline corrected softly. Preserved, like a fruit sealed in wax or a carcass packed in salt. The curse keeps you alive because it has not yet chosen a successor. The last of the marrow blood must keep beating until the next vessel is found. Charles' voice cracked. And when it finds one, then it will let you rot. Charles felt dizzy, his knees unsteady in the sinking mud. Why tell me this? Why bring me here? Eveline looked away. Because I needed you to understand, she whispered. Before you accuse me of abandoning you, before you hate me for letting the house fall, before you blame me for surviving. He swallowed hard. I don't hate you, Eveline. Her eyes glimmered with something sharp, pain, disbelief, or perhaps longing. No, she said, but you will. Charles stepped closer. Why? Eveline finally looked up, and in her eyes he saw a truth so cold it made the marsh seem warm. Because I know who the land is choosing next. Charles froze. Who? Eveline closed her eyes. Me. The word fell between them like a dropped blade. Charles shook his head violently. No, that's impossible. You're not a marrow. You're bound, Eveline whispered, by the blood I spilled, by the men I tended, by the screams that soaked the walls, by the years I lived beneath your family's shadow. The land does not care for blood alone. She touched her chest. It cares for those who serve it, willingly or not. Charles felt a tremor ripple through him. You're saying the land wants you to replace me? Yes. And when it does, you will die, Eveline said softly. Immediately, painfully, completely. Her voice did not shake. Charles felt the world tilt. Fog swirled. A cold wind rolled out of the cave like breath. Then I refuse, he said through clenched teeth. I won't let the curse take you. Eveline tilted her head. And what power do you imagine you have against the land itself? Charles stepped forward until he stood only inches from her. Enough to stop this, he growled. Enough to save you. For the first time, Eveline's expression cracked. Fear, faint but real. Save me, she whispered. Charles, you don't even understand what I've become. A tremor shuddered through the earth beneath them. The cave mouth exhaled a long, low sigh. Eveline stepped back, her eyes growing distant, hollow. It's waking, she murmured. It feels us. Charles reached for her arm. Eveline, stay with me. She closed her eyes, as though battling something inside her. It's too late, she breathed. Once the land chooses, it does not release. Charles tightened his grip. I won't let you go. Her voice broke, barely audible. Then you'll have to destroy me. The marsh went silent. The cave behind them pulsed, and something ancient stirred beneath the earth. For a moment, neither of them moved. The cave exhaled again, slow, deliberate, like a sleeper waking from centuries of slumber. The air itself seemed to tighten around them, humming with a vibration Charles felt in his bones. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was worse, patient. Eveline's breath hitched. Her pupils thinned, stretching into narrow slits before returning to normal. She pressed a hand against her chest, as if steadying a heart that did not beat like a human one. Charles, she said softly, you must let go. He did not. I'm not leaving you to this. You can't fight it. He stepped closer. Then I'll learn how. She shook her head. You don't understand. You're not free. You're not just connected to the curse. You're tied to me. My choosing drags you with it." Charles frowned. "What do you mean?" Eveline swallowed hard, and for the first time since he found her, she looked afraid. When the land begins choosing its successor, it binds the two potential vessels with a kind of tether, a spiritual chain. One fades as the other strengthens. Charles's pulse hammered painfully. "So if you grow stronger, you grow weaker." The words slashed into him. That explained the ache in his wound, the fatigue, the strange heaviness in his limbs, the way his vision dimmed whenever Eveline drew near. He was feeding her transformation, and if she crossed a threshold he couldn't see, couldn't sense, he would die. The earth beneath them trembled again, slightly stronger this time, sending ripples through the shallow water. The mud between Charles' boots began to bubble, as though something beneath the surface exhaled into it. Eveline's eyes flicked downward. "It's listening." Charles instinctively raised the pistol Keel had given him. "What is?" She stepped back. "Lower that. It won't help." He didn't. The bubbling grew more frantic. Small fissures split open in the mud, leaking thin trails of black liquid, oil, or something far thicker. Eveline watched the cracks widen. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's hungry." The mud split apart. A pale shape rose from the muck, a long bleached rib slick with soil. Another rose beside it. Then another. A cluster of bones pushing through the earth like fingers clawing upward. Charles stumbled back. "What in God's name?" Eveline grabbed his arm and yanked him to the side just as something burst from the mud with a wet, snapping sound. A jawbone. Human. Clean. Toothless. The hinge still intact, though the bone was ancient. More bones emerged. A spine, crooked and elongated. A femur with carvings etched into the surface. A skull cracked through the center, as if something had escaped from inside. A skeletal pile formed, rising higher and higher. Then the bones began to arrange themselves, not into a human shape, not into any shape Charles recognized. More like a lattice, a structure, a cage, a shrine, made of the remains of everyone the land had consumed. Eveline stepped between Charles and the growing bone shrine, her voice trembling. "It's showing itself because of you, because you defy its choice." Charles felt nausea churn in his gut. "I won't let it take you." "You don't get to choose," Eveline snapped. The first sharpness he'd heard from her in years. Then she softened, almost collapsing. "Neither of us do." The bone structure quivered, rearranging itself with rattling clicks. Hollow sockets seemed to stare at Charles from a dozen angles. The air around it smelled of copper and dampstone. A whisper, cold and thin as winter wind, drifted out of the structure. "Marrow." Charles froze. Eveline went pale. "It's calling your name," she whispered. "Marrow. Last. Last. Last." The whisper slithered across the water, crawling up Charles's spine. He felt as though hands, cold, soil-soaked, were pressing against his ribs from the inside. Eveline grabbed his shoulders. "Charles, listen to me. Once it calls you last, it means the transition is beginning." "Transition?" She hesitated. "I'm becoming what your father feared more than death." "What is that?" The land's voice. The bone shrine suddenly snapped open like a mouth, ribs unfurling into jagged arches. Something dark roiled inside it, a cloud of shadow, thick and twisting like smoke trapped underwater. Charles staggered back. "What is that?" Eveline's voice was barely more than a breath. "The hunger." Charles's panic gave way to rage. "This curse ends tonight." Eveline flinched. You can't kill the land. He raised the pistol again. Watch me try. It's not a thing, she snapped. It's a law. Charles froze. What? Evelyn pointed at the swirling darkness inside the bone shrine. When your ancestor first intruded here, the land reacted, not as a monster, but as a system, a balance. Something was taken from the soil, so the soil took something back. She stepped closer to the shrine, not in fear, but reverence. Generations of Marrows lived fat on land that demanded a price, and every time the land took a life, it grew stronger, more aware. She looked over her shoulder at him. Your father tried to sever the bond. He failed because he misunderstood something vital. The land doesn't want pain. The darkness pulsed. It wants continuation. Charles felt the bottom of his stomach drop. Continuation, meaning... Me? Meaning a vessel, Evelyn whispered. A voice, a guardian, a keeper of the balance. She touched the bone lattice gently, and it shivered like a living thing beneath her fingers. It chose the Marrows because your ancestor was the first to survive its touch. But I... She took a shaking breath. I survived its hunger. And that is rarer. Charles shook his head. You're not a Marrow. Pain makes lineage, she said quietly, not blood. The bone shrine let out a rattling sigh. A dozen skulls clicked into alignment, forming a shape like an eye. Evelyn stiffened. It wants an answer. Charles raised the pistol again. I have one. Evelyn turned, voice sharp. Stop! But Charles fired. The gunshot ripped through the marsh, echoing against the trees. The bullet struck the bone shrine and passed straight through it, splashing into the water on the other side. The structure didn't even flinch. Evelyn exhaled shakily. I told you. It cannot be killed. Charles's hand trembled. Then what can? Evelyn looked at him, and in her eyes he saw a truth that hollowed him out. There are only two ways to end a lineage-bound curse, she whispered. One, the vessel completes the ritual of binding and becomes the land's eternal voice. Charles swallowed. Meaning you. Meaning me. And the second way? Evelyn hesitated. Too long. Evelyn, she bit her lip. The second way is for the tethered bloodline to end before the transition is complete. Charles blinked. You mean I'd have to kill myself? She shook her head. No. A long, terrible silence stretched. You would have to be killed. Charles's voice cracked. By who? Evelyn looked at him with eyes full of sorrow. By me. The shadows inside the bone shrine surged as though delighted. The marsh fell silent. And slowly, so slowly, the shrine began to unfold, forming a long, open pathway of bone and shadow leading into the cave. Evelyn trembled. It's inviting us inside, Charles whispered. What happens if we go in? Evelyn's voice was barely audible. It decides which of us becomes its voice, and which of us becomes its feast. The morning after the fire, the plantation lay under a shroud of smoke, so thin it looked like the sky itself was mourning. Ashes drifted like spent snowflakes. The air was swollen with silence, a silence no birds dared pierce. As if the earth knew. Something had ended, and something far older had awakened. Mara stood alone at the edge of the charred cotton fields, her wrists still marked from the rope, her skin still stinging from the heat of flames. She hadn't slept. Sleep had begun to avoid her ever since she whispered the forbidden words of the Eve-keeper's oath. An oath meant to save her master's life, but never meant to be spoken by human tongues. Behind her, the plantation house, half burned and half standing, clung to life the same way its owner did. Master Edwin Thorne lay inside the ruins, breathing in shreds. Alive only because Mara had answered the call of the dead woman in her dreams. The spectral slave nurse who once tended these fields and whose bloodline Mara unknowingly carried. A nurse who had died protecting a life she despised, cursed to pass her power to the next daughter born in secret. Her name was Alika. And now Alika's shadow hung near Mara like a second spine. Edwin calls for Mara. When the sun finally pried itself above the ruins, Mara heard his voice. Mara, if you're out there, come. Weak, trembling, yet unmistakably him. The master she had saved, the man who had both brutalized and depended on her. The contradiction that haunted her every step. She walked back into the house. Charred beams groaned overhead. The smell of wet soot clung to her clothes. Edwin lay on the floor, propped up on scorched pillows, his face pale as chalk. "You saved me," he whispered. "The doctor said. He said I shouldn't be alive." "You shouldn't," she replied softly, not as accusation but fact. Edwin swallowed. What did you do that night?" Mara's spine tightened. Beneath her skin something coiled. "I did what I was taught never to speak of," she said. "I called on the evekeepers." He frowned. "Some African sorcery?" "No, not sorcery." She stepped closer. "A covenant." His gaze sharpened, uneasy. "With what?" Mara did not answer. Instead, the air around her dimmed, as though a cloud passed indoors. Edwin shivered. "You brought me back," he said. "But you're different." "So are you," she murmured. And he was. His eyes flickered, not in color but in depth, like someone had left a lantern burning behind them. A life pulled back from death carried a lingering trace of the place it went. "I didn't ask to be saved," he breathed. "I didn't ask to save you," she returned. By midday, the surviving overseers and neighboring landowners gathered outside. Rumors had sprinted through the surrounding counties. Thorne Plantation burned. The master is alive, but barely. A slave girl pulled him from the fire. Strange chanting was heard before dawn. Fear made men stupid, and panic made them cruel. A mob of them stomped up the ruined steps. "Bring out the girl," someone shouted. "She caused this." No one survives a fire like that unless devil work is involved. She should be hung before sunset. Inside, Edwin struggled upright. "They'll kill you," he rasped. "They'll kill both of us," she corrected. "You think they want a weakened master who saw death and returned. They fear what they don't understand." He opened his mouth, but another voice answered first. A woman's voice, soft, cold, and centuries old. "They fear what they owe." Mara froze. The temperature dropped. The candles flickered, though there was no wind. Edwin's eyes widened. Who was that?" Mara swallowed hard. "My ancestor." And then Alika appeared. Not in flesh, but in silhouette. A darker darkness in the corner of the burned room. A shadow with the curve of a woman's shoulders, a cloak of smoke, and a face that flickered like dying embers. Edwin recoiled. "God help us!" "There is no help for those who break covenants," the spirit said. Her voice carried the sound of distant chains dragging across stone. Mara bowed her head. She felt the old sadness return, the sorrow of a nurse forced by white masters to heal men who treated her as property, the sorrow of saving lives she would rather see swallowed by the earth. "You saved him," Alika murmured to Mara, "as I once saved mine, but the oath demands a price." Edwin looked between them. "Price?" "Yes," Mara whispered. "A life restored must be balanced. Alika stepped closer. The floorboards blackened beneath her ghostly feet. "The life we returned," she intoned, "must serve the one who called us." Edwin stared, breath hitching. "Serve? Her?" "Yes," Alika said, "but not as a master commands a slave. That time is dying." She looked directly at him. "You owe her your life. You owe her your future." The mob outside began to pound on the half-ruined door. "Mara!" voices roared. "Bring out the witch!" Alika's shadow drifted behind Mara and merged into her spine, settling like a second heartbeat. Mara inhaled sharply, then lifted her head. "Open the door," she told Edwin. He hesitated. "They'll kill you." "No," she said softly. "They will listen." When the door creaked open, sunlight spilled across Mara's face like a benediction, and then twisted into something sharper. The crowd recoiled. Something about her eyes, something ancient staring through them, made men falter. "She's possessed," one man whispered. "Or blessed," murmured another, trembling. Mara stepped down the last burned step. "You came to judge me," she said, her voice sounding like two voices layered, hers and Alika's. "But it is you who built this world, you who fed it with blood, you who chained us and called it order." The men shifted uncomfortably. "Let the girl go," an overseer barked. "She's confused." Mara raised one hand. He screamed, dropping to his knees, not harmed, but overwhelmed by a force that felt like 1,000 grieving mothers pressing their hands upon his shoulders. "I saved my master," Mara said, "not because he owned me, but because my blood remembers how to save those who do not deserve it." Edwin stepped behind her, limping but standing. "She saved me," he said loudly to the mob, "and I stand with her." The gasps rippled like wind through wheat. "You stand with a slave," someone spat. "No," Edwin whispered, looking at Mara. "I stand with the woman who gave me back my breath." Silence. Not a breath dared move. Mara looked at the men. "This plantation is no longer yours to command, not mine, not his. But its history does not end with fire." Alika's voice whispered through the wind, "Free them." Edwin nodded slowly. "All enslaved people on this land are free." A stunned hush followed. Some men shouted objections, others backed away, crossing themselves. But something intangible, something bigger than fear, held them back from violence. A reckoning beyond mortal comprehension had taken root. That night, Mara visited Alika's grave, an unmarked mound beneath an ancient oak where hundreds had once toiled. Fireflies scattered like sparks of memory. Alika appeared, softer now, less shadow, more human. "It is done," Mara whispered. "Not done," the spirit corrected gently, "but begun. You broke the cycle I could not." Mara bowed her head. "What happens to me now?" Alika touched her cheek, a cold, tender brush. "You live, and you heal, but no more chains. Not for you, not for those who follow your name." "And you?" Mara asked. Alika smiled faintly, her edges dissolving like smoke fading at dawn. "I rest." And then she vanished, her final sigh drifting like a lullaby. The dawn of another world. When morning arrived, the enslaved families gathered around Mara. Many cried openly, holding hands. They looked not at a slave girl, not at a witch, but at the woman who had stood between death and life. Edwin approached her, bandaged but upright. "What do you want to do now?" he asked quietly. Mara looked at the rising sun. For the first time in her life, it felt warm instead of distant. "I want to build something new," she said. "A place where no one's worth is written by another's hand." Edwin nodded. Then I will help you. Whether he said it from guilt or gratitude or something like redemption, Mara didn't care. She would not be owned. Not again. She would choose her own path, and if others wished to walk it beside her, they could. The land behind them smoldered, but the ashes glimmered gold in the light, a beginning disguised as an ending. Mara turned to the freed men, women, and children. Let us begin. And together, beneath the brightening sky, they did. Thank you for joining us in the shadows tonight, where the line between life and death blurs and the past refuses to stay buried. If Mara's story left you unsettled, haunted, or questioning what hides in the silence, then her tale has done its work. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another journey into the forgotten, the forbidden, and the macabre. Until next time. Watch the shadows and remember, some debts are never truly paid.